Hello, everyone. I'm Carol Brevet. I'm the host of Food Integrity Now, and I am here today with Zen Honeycutt of Moms Across America. Welcome, Zen.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Carol, for having me. I appreciate it so much.
Well, I think most of my audience knows you, but for those who don't know Zen, she is the founding executive director of Moms Across America, which is a nonprofit organization. And Moms Across America educates and inspires mothers and others to transform the food industry and environment, creating healthy communities together. And Zen has been featured on many major news stations and documentaries. As a matter of fact, I wanted to just share with you, I just recently watched Zen's, or Moms Across America's documentary that they did, I think last July, wasn't it, Zen?
I think that's when we released it, yes.
Okay, and if you haven't seen it, it's fantastic. It's called Communities Rising, and it is such a great short documentary. I think it's like 45 minutes long, that I think it's especially great to share with your friends that really don't understand what GMOs are and glyphosate, and it's just a really good educational tool, and I highly recommend it. So how do they get that before we get on to
they can just go to YouTube or to our website, momsacrossamerica.org. Under momsacrossamerica.org, it's under About and Movies and GMO info. Or on YouTube, you just type in Communities Rising and, plus Moms Across America, and it'll come up.
Great.
And it's free. Yep.
Yeah, it is free too. It's fantastic. And Zen is also an author, and I do have to plug her book a little because I love it too. And this is her book, Unstoppable. It's transforming sickness and struggle into triumph, empowerment, and a celebration of community. So you can find that also on the website. And it's a fabulous book. So highly, highly recommend it. Let me put that back right here. Maybe I won't knock everything else off. Okay. So I wanted to have Zen on the show today. Zen and I were recently at an event, a salon event in someone's home in Southern California. And the guest speaker there was Professor Seralini. And it was really an honor to hear him talk, but he offered some information that I will say it's not brand new information. He offered information about a study that he did, I think it was last January that it came out.
Yes.
And this information I feel is so important because a lot of people didn't really hear about this study. And of course, mainstream media did not pick up on it, but it is so important because it has to do with other ingredients that he found in glyphosate-based herbicides, including arsenic and heavy metals. So this is a big deal. So I wanted to talk with Zen because she really understands the science around this, about why this is important to know and why we should care. So Zen, let's get started. Tell me a little bit from your perspective, what you know about what Seralini found out.
Well, this is huge information and extremely important in many ways. And I do have to say that I had the privilege of going to southern France. This was after the Monsanto tribunal. I went to Jérôme Duzelet, the chef that he came with. They both wrote a book together called The Great Health Scam. I went to him.
1 second, let me just.
Yep. Yeah, so Seralini and Jérôme Duzelet, the chef, wrote this book together called The Great Health Scam, and it's a conversation about the scam of GMOs and pesticides in our food supply. And I was able to go to the south of France, an adorable little town, I believe it's near Barjac, the town that actually got their school system to go organic and pesticide free. So I got to go to that school as well. Anyway, in that meeting with nonprofit leaders from around the world, we sat down and discussed this study. And we could not release the information right away until he got it published in a reputable journal. So, but we as a group were able to hash out, what does this mean? What are you talking about with this? And how does it compare to, we were able to discuss all that. So I've had the ability to discuss this with scientists and heads of nonprofit organizations. And so that's why I believe I can communicate this in a way that might make sense to people. I am not a scientist, and I don't pretend to be, but this is my take on it. Okay, so what Seralini and his team did was they conducted a study testing the final formulation of Roundup, which is not usually done. A lot of people focus on glyphosate itself, and glyphosate is the declared active chemical ingredient. And I specify declared because the manufacturers can declare any of the ingredients, right, in these final formulations of a product to be the active chemical ingredient. And Monsanto happened to choose glyphosate. Now, why would they do that? Well, first of all, we must set the tone, okay? Set the scene. The scene is that in 1973, arsenic was banned from being used as a pesticide or an herbicide. And it had been used for hundreds of years. In fact, I think it was the Chinese that used it, hundreds of years ago. And so the EPA banned it, said no more arsenic in pesticides and herbicides. Lo and behold, in 1974, the company Monsanto introduced a new herbicide called Roundup, and the declared active chemical ingredient was glyphosate. Now, glyphosate in many animal tests and studies has shown to not be toxic in the sense of the definition of toxic in the scientific study world on chemicals is that it kills more than 50% of the test subjects in 96 hours. Now,
So Zen, can I interrupt for a second? So
Sure.
That would be considered more of an acute toxin rather than a chronic toxin. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you. Yes, thank you. Acute toxicity rather than chronic toxicity.
Okay, go ahead.
And that would mean that, like I said, 50% of the test subjects die within 96 hours. Now, I did a Freedom of Information Act to the EPA about the studies that they considered in order to approve Monsanto's Roundup. And just to give you an example, one of the studies was on oysters. And within 96 hours, they actually say that within 96 hours, the oysters, most of the oysters were closed and not feeding. So to them, that doesn't show toxicity because they weren't all dead. They were closed and not feeding, right? So that doesn't show acute toxicity to them, which is ridiculous because closed and not feeding could mean a coma, right? What happened on the 5th day? Or the 6th day, right? So this is just one example of the ridiculousness of the assessment of harm from chemicals, right? So toxicity is different from harmful, or acute toxicity is different from chronic toxicity. Okay, so that's really important to consider. And so the Monsanto declared glyphosate the active chemical ingredient in Roundup. So all they needed to do to get it approved was to produce studies that showed that glyphosate was not acutely toxic.
And again, those were short-term studies.
Yes, short-term studies. They may have had some long-term studies, but according to Seralini, they did not assess blood analysis.
Oh, okay.
And we know also from books like Evangelos Valientos, who was also at the event that we went to, Poison Spring, his book, he clearly says that when animals die in some of these studies, whether they be short-term or long-term, the EPA has been known, the manufacturers that commission labs have been known to just throw those dead animals out, and they don't consider them in the final assessment of the toxicity, right, of these products. There has been basically fraudulent practices happening within these studies. Okay, so they choose glyphosate, the declared active chemical ingredient, and they can get it approved because it's not acutely toxic. It is harmful long-term. It causes endocrine disruption long-term. It causes tumors long-term. It causes liver disease long-term, right? But not within 96 hours. So this is a major scam, right, that they pulled. Now, lo and behold, Seralini and his team test Roundup, the final formulation, for arsenic. And guess what? It's there. So what they did was a switcheroo. They said, okay, we can't use arsenic as a pesticide or an herbicide anymore. So let's put glyphosate as the active chemical ingredient. This is really serious.
Yeah, and if you connect these dots, you can see why they did it that way.
Yes, and I believe that they know that arsenic is still in there and that heavy metals are in there. They have to know. It's their product. They're doing testing all the time, I'm sure, on different products. And it's very important that the public knows this. Now, I've spoken to people, maybe I shouldn't quote them when I get permission, but I've spoken to top scientists and consumer scientists in the United States. And this one gentleman in particular said that he believes that arsenic is there because of the petroleum-based sludge that gets put into pesticides and herbicides. And he believes they get put in there simply as a waste byproduct from the oil industry, that they have to have somewhere to put it, just like the steel industry puts fluoride in our water because they have to have somewhere to put it, right? It costs them a lot of money to dispose of these chemicals in a safe way, like in a cement drum, like right in the middle of the desert somewhere or whatever. It costs them a lot of money to dispose of these byproducts. And so they want to have somewhere to put them. So the steel industry puts their leftover fluoride into our water supply in many states. And that is a really bad idea. It's a neurotoxin. And the oil industry, whether it be fracking or natural gas or the plastic industries, whatever oil industries are, they put their sludge into pesticides and herbicides. And
how crazy is that? They're throwing this sludge that contains all these toxic chemicals, and they're putting it into the herbicides and pesticides, and then we're using that on our food.
Yes.
And that's okay?
It's not okay.
And
we are furious about it. And moms and parents and people across the country are realizing what's happening. And they get now that this is happening. And so, the seriousness of this is, enormous because arsenic is a known poison. Now, I want to be clear, there's organic and non-organic types of arsenic, right? So if you take a mineral supplement and it says arsenic in there, it'll also say copper and zinc and gold and all types of trace minerals. That's okay. That's needed. Our body needs, all types of trace minerals, but we don't need 500 parts per billion of inorganic arsenic, right? Of the arsenic that's in RoundUp. In fact, chronic poisoning has been shown at 0.17 parts per billion of arsenic. 0.17, so less than one, way less than one part per billion, and 500 parts per billion, up to 500 parts per billion is what was found in RoundUp. And keep in mind that Seralini and his team tested at least 12 different brands of glyphosate-based herbicides. They could have been RoundUp or Ranger Pro or Rodeo, different brand names, but they were all glyphosate-based herbicides. And
they all tested positive.
For arsenic and heavy metals, yes, yeah. And or heavy metals, yes. Mm-hmm.
That is crazy. And I looked up some of the symptoms of arsenic poisoning, and if you listen to this, you can see, how it relates to these herbicides and some of the effects that we're finding with the glyphosate-based herbicide. So gastroenteritis, multi-organ failure, neurological, cardiac, respiratory issues, renal and liver dysfunction, abdominal pain, diarrhea, rashes, and that list can go on and on.
Yes, and everybody that's listening right now knows somebody. If you don't have those symptoms yourself, everybody knows somebody with those types of issues. Asthma, autism, autoimmune issues. The autoimmune issues can be related to chronic kidney issues and liver issues. All of these gut issues, all of them can be related. So our human population is in a health crisis, and I believe, and many doctors and scientists now believe, the major contributing factor is glyphosate-based herbicides.
Yeah.
Now, yeah, and what Seralini was careful to clarify in the meeting was that so a lot of people are just saying that it's glyphosate by itself. And we want to be really clear that it's not just glyphosate, that the co-formulants, the other formulants, and he doesn't call them inerts because inerts means not active, right? He won't use call them inerts or adjuvants. He's committed to being very clear about his communication. The co-formulants in Roundup have been shown to be 1,000 times more toxic than glyphosate alone. So we have to consider the co-formulants in any type of chemical product.
And
now,
they're not testing the co-formulas. Would you share with our listeners what happened when you went to the EPA, and I think it was the Pesticide Review Board meeting?
Yeah, so I was invited to go with a team of scientists to speak at a congressional briefing on glyphosate, and the room was packed, and all of these, congressional aides and staff members were there. It was really great. And then afterwards, we got to speak at the EPA. We met with the entire Pesticide Review Board, and along with a team of scientists, and the team, many of the scientists were presenting them with all kinds of information. And I had less than 2 minutes to speak, but I chose to focus on the question that Seralini advised me to ask, because I told him I was going to this meeting, and he was very kind to take time out of his busy schedule to advise me. And he said, ask them, do they have any long-term animal studies with blood analysis on the final formulation of Roundup? And so I asked that, and they said, which ones? There's hundreds of brands. And I said, any of them. And they paused. It was very quiet. There was a lot of tension in the room. And then the Pesticide Review Board, not the director, but the person standing next to him, a woman that has a top position, she said, no, not that we're aware of. And I said, then how can you claim that it's safe? And the Pesticide Review Board director ended the meeting. He said, you've come here with a lot of questions and a lot of information, and we need to assess that information, so we're going to complete this meeting and blah, blah, blah. That was it. He refused to answer the question. My blood was boiling. I was like, I had to really control myself. As they walked out of that room, I wanted to scream, shame on you. This is a fraud that you are perpetuating on the American people. And I had to contain myself, because as soon as you start becoming emotional or upset or angry, people call you a hysterical woman and, whatever. So we followed up with them, and they eventually did agree to, not they, but actually the National Toxicology Program, which is a part of the EPA, did agree to assess the final formulation. And they did find that the final formulation is more toxic than glyphosate. And yet the EPA is still reviewing glyphosate. I believe it's been close to 10 years now. It was 9 years the last time I remember, but it might have surpassed that now. So they're still reviewing glyphosate to see whether or not they're going to grant its license for another 15 years or X amount of years, right? So we need them to be responsible and to revoke the license of glyphosate, because it's never used alone. This is an important factor, right? They've approved glyphosate by itself, but yet glyphosate is never used alone. It is always used with these other co-formulants that have been shown to be 1,000 times more toxic.
Yeah, and what a brilliant idea on their part. When I say brilliant, I mean, what a great way to hide their quote-unquote inert ingredients, which are not inert. I think Seralini said that in Roundup, the glyphosate percentage is 41, 42%. And it could, in some of the other ones, it could be as high as 50 or 52%. But, and the other ingredients, they don't have to disclose, because they're just surfactants and adjuvants, and they're not important. We don't need to worry about that. Well, that is fraud.
It is. They are important. Otherwise, they wouldn't be in the product. And, for instance, one of the co-formulants, POEA, I don't know how to say the full scientific name of it, but the initials are POEA, are banned in, I don't know if it's all of Europe or many countries in Europe, but that co-formulant is not allowed to be used in any formulations of Roundup or glyphosate-based herbicides in Europe, and yet it's allowed here. There's many things that are wrong with this system, but that is one of the main things, is that the final formulation assessed. And I did talk to some scientists and consumer advocates and, you know, leaders in the industry. And the reason that I was given for this was that the EPA, when they were tasked with approving chemicals after, God bless her soul, Rachel Carson's book, Silent Spring, right? After that book, the EPA was formed. And they said, okay, we're going to assess all these different chemicals. The problem was there was, at the time, I think 35,000 different chemical products. And they said, that's going to take us, you know, hundreds of years with the amount of staff that they have, you know, to assess and or approve or disapprove all of these thousands of products. I mean, yeah, chemical products. And so what they decided to do was to only test the declared active chemical ingredient, because you could have thousands of herbicides with the same declared active chemical ingredient. You see what I'm saying? You can then group them all together. It's sort of like having a lawsuit with a class action, right? And then you group together 2,000 people. Instead of doing them one at a time, you group them all together and you make an assessment based on all of those chemicals together. But they only chose one of the declared active chemical ingredients. And so they're doing it as a matter of efficiency to approve as many chemicals as possible. Now, there's something fundamentally wrong with that. And it showed up when I was speaking to the EPA the first time I went there, because we found glyphosate in breast milk, right? And 10,000 moms called the EPA in 3 days, and they invited me to go speak to them along with some other organizations. And we went and spoke to them. At the end of the meeting, the branch manager of the pesticide review board said, well, you know, our job is to approve these chemicals and to assess the maximum amount that you know, humans and life, you know, animal life can sort of receive or, you know, withstand, right? The maximum amount that we can survive. And I said, no. Your job is not to approve chemicals. Your job is to protect the environment and human life. You've got it all mixed up. They see their job as the people who are there to approve all these chemicals. So if that's the context you're taking, you're going to say, how can I assess and approve as many chemicals as possible in the shortest amount of time? So that's why they're going to choose one of the ingredients, right? That could be a commonality in thousands of those ingredients, and then just say, okay, have at it.
Yeah, it's really insane. And as far as testing all the different chemicals, glyphosate is the #1 used pesticide in the world, as far as I know. I think it's 1.4 billion pounds are sprayed, and it seems like that would be a priority.
Yes, it would. You would think that they would make time to assess those final formulations. There's only 750 of them, right? But here's the thing, though. There doesn't need to be 750 of them in the Monsanto papers. The documents that were revealed in the lawsuit, they actually admit that one formulation is the same formulation as a previous one. They've just rebranded it. So they admit this in the documents. So there really isn't 750 different formulations, right, of these glyphosate-based herbicides. There's 750 different brands, but there's not 750 different formulations. So they really could, you know, condense that down to probably 300 or something and assess those final formulations and just say, listen, folks, these are not cutting the mustard. They're not passing tests. They are toxic. They are harmful, and they should not be sprayed on our food. One thing the viewers really should know too is that glyphosate does not wash off. It goes into the cells. It goes into the plant.
It's systemic.
Yes, it's systemic, and it causes. It's not like a broadleaf herbicide either. It kills everything. It doesn't kill just particular kinds of grass or particular kinds of weeds. It kills everything. So, and it also chelates, meaning it grabs onto and holds the vital nutrients of any living thing it touches. So it essentially gives the plant AIDS. It gives it like an autoimmune disease. And then the normally harmless bacteria in the soil can kill it. And so, and it raises antibiotic resistance. it is an antibiotic. It kills off the good bacteria in our gut. I mean, it works in very harmful ways. It can cause cell damage and, all kinds of liver disease, like we mentioned earlier, all kinds of things. So, I want to be clear. There are some scientists that are saying it's just glyphosate. There are other scientists that are saying, no, it's the co-formulants. I want to be clear that it's both.
Yeah. Well, it makes sense that it's both. I mean, if there's a high level of arsenic in it, I mean, it makes sense that arsenic is going to affect us. And, not only the arsenic, but I was thinking about the heavy metals too. I know that one of the types of Alzheimer's that Dr. Bredesen, who wrote a wonderful book called The End of Alzheimer's, who I've interviewed him, so if you haven't heard that interview, go to foodintegritynow.org and look it up. But one of the type of mechanisms that he said for getting Alzheimer's is heavy metal toxicity. Mm-hmm. It clearly states that. So when you start connecting all of these dots and you look at the rise of autism in this country, along with all the other chronic diseases that, are on the rise, it makes sense that we should be concerned about the heavy metals that we're consuming. And now if we're getting that mixed in with our glyphosate, and that gets into our food supply, that's a real issue. So,
and the important thing to know is that glyphosate breaks down the blood-brain barrier, or the placental wall barrier, or the cell barrier, the membranes of anywhere in your body, and allows those other heavy metals and toxins to cause more harm. It's kind of like a bad guy who breaks down a dam and lets all the other bad guys in, right? So it's really an important factor that glyphosate is there, and it's incredibly, harmful that these other heavy metals and toxins are there as well. And I would like to know what those other heavy metals are. I have to have another discussion with Sarah Laney. We know that aluminum is incredibly harmful to the brain. There's been studies to show that people with Alzheimer's and autism had high levels of aluminum in particular parts of their brain. There's of course all kinds of science on other heavy metals that are, very toxic. So we really do need to be investigating into this more and eat organic, please.
Yeah, eat. That's the answer. That's our best solution. Eat organic. Yeah. I just want to say one more thing on arsenic. It was kind of interesting after I went to the event and was listening to Sarah Laney talk about the arsenic. I went to my doctor and asked for a heavy metal test. And I have to tell you what he said to me. He said, like what? And I said, oh, like arsenic. And he goes, is somebody trying to kill you? And I said, maybe. I mean, it was just an interesting comment, coming from a doctor. Really? Yeah. Somebody trying to kill you?
What? It's in the food supply. In fact, one of our moms said that her husband is a trucker, right? He delivers all kinds of things, and he had to get a specific license, a hazmat license, to deliver chicken feed because chicken feed is so high in arsenic. Gosh. So you've got to wonder. The government's allowing this. I don't think that the government is trying to kill us, but some people would claim that, there's a major problem here when your government allows a known poison to be so high on chicken feed that we're going to eat those chickens, by the way, right? And so, keep in mind too that the EPA allows 400 parts per million of glyphosate residues to be on chicken feed and cow feed and pig feed and all of that, on grains that are fed to animals, 400 parts per million. Now, if 500 parts per billion of arsenic was what was found in RoundUp, you've got to wonder how much arsenic is on the chicken feed if 400 parts per million, right, of glyphosate is allowed. And glyphosate, as you mentioned earlier, is only 41 or 42% of the final formulation. That means there could be much higher levels of arsenic than there is glyphosate.
And that begs the question, who's checking the chicken feed?
Well, some people tested for arsenic, right? Because they had to classify it as a hazmat situation because they tested. What those levels are, I don't know. I'm sure there's some science out there on that. But how much of that arsenic gets into our bodies when we eat that chicken? That's what I want to know. And since we know that glyphosate does bioaccumulate, right? It's been found in breast milk, in bone tissue, in tendons, in muscle tissue. Monica Kruger's study from Germany showed that. We know that it bioaccumulates. So if glyphosate's bioaccumulating, what about the arsenic? I know, like, I had my blood tested. I had 4 parts per billion of of arsenic. Sorry, I had 4 parts per billion of arsenic in my blood when back when I was pretty sick. I had Epstein-Barr virus. My autoimmune system was very low, and she said, this is concerning, but it's pretty normal these days.
Wow.
Yeah. And she said, you need to rinse your rice, rinse it and dump it out, try to eat less chicken.
That's why you soak it overnight is best.
Yeah, soak it overnight and dump out the water and then eat. That gets rid of 80% of the arsenic apparently.
Yeah.
And then, eat less chicken, and what she meant by that is conventional chicken.
Right.
So organic chicken is not going to have, as far as I understand, is not going to have these high levels of arsenic, but I guess more testing would have to be done on that. So, so these levels are extremely concerning. And, the answer really is to eat organic and to speak up to our senators and our representatives and make sure that they know that we do not want funding for this GMO toxic chemical farming. If they switch the funding to regenerative organic farming, we could absolutely restore the soil, have clean water, regain health in America. We could draw down carbon into the soil. We could reverse climate change. We could. The farming is a major, major factor of the rising temperatures now and the climate chaos that's happening. So I digressed a little bit there, but it's all connected.
Yeah, it is. It's one thing connects to the other, and you just keep connecting the dots. But the answer is to eat organic, grow your own food if you can, and support organizations like Moms Across America and mine too, Food Integrity Now, all the people that are really trying to help educate and get the word out there. And don't buy their poison food.
Yes.
If you shop organic, you're saying no. So
you're opting out. And listen, I want to say, a lot of people out there might have a problem receiving this information. Hopefully not, but from 2 women, right, that don't have scientific backgrounds. And I urge you not just to believe us, but to go look at the science and look it up on momsacrossamerica.org under data. We have a whole slew of scientific studies from reputable scientists, peer-reviewed studies from around the world. And on my blog, or, we have an article. If you go into our blog and search arsenic, the word arsenic, you can find the article that has the scientific study that Seralini and his team in France did. So please do research on your own and, just look it up and get in there, because you could be taking supplement after supplement. You could be exercising. You could be going to the gym and detoxing in a sauna. You could be doing all kinds of things for your health. But if you're not eating organic, you're not allowing your body to recover, because you're constantly exposing yourself to the toxins that are harming your body, right? You can't like say, I'm going to get dry and then stand in a shower. That's just, that doesn't work. So you need to really, do the work and investigate what's going on for yourself.
Exactly. And I'm a holistic health coach, and I won't even take a client unless they agree to eat organic. It's just out of integrity. It won't work.
Yeah, I love that. I really am glad that you're a stand for people, and that makes it valuable to them. Like, their time is valuable. They're going to do the work and have progress happen. And it makes your time valuable too, because, you can be like a hamster on a wheel spinning around while they're drinking Coke and,
not going to work. It's not
organic food.
No, I just tell them if they're not willing, I'm not your person. Go find somebody, you know. But anyway, so thank you so much, Zen. The website is momsacrossamerica.org, and there is so much great information on there. Like Zen said, go look up the studies. I say the same thing you just said, Zen. I say, don't believe it. Don't believe everything I say. I'm not the man in the white coat. Go look it up. Do your own research, and it's out there.
I do have to add, though, even the men in the white coat, the scientists, if you are going to believe them, you really do need to look into who funded them, right?
Exactly.
Who's behind the man in the white coat? Is it a whole bunch of black-suited Monsanto, executives? Are they paying that university? Does that scientist, is he tenured, in that position because Monsanto funded that chair for him?
Yeah.
So you've got to look into who's actually funding the science and what do they stand to benefit out of it. And I promise you, the testing, the surveys that we've done, Moms Across America has not done scientific studies. We've done surveys, like 36 children, tested them for glyphosate, and we tested lots of gathered information on breast milk and urine, and tested wine and all kinds of things. We don't stand to benefit from that. That is we're putting the information out so that you can educate yourself and take action to you heal your bodies and heal your families and heal your communities. The RoundUp manufacturers, is it $40 billion a year in profit? Yeah. So they fund an awful lot of scientists to find the information out in their favor. Okay, so you have something else, and thank you so much.
I just want to say, get Zen's book, Unstoppable. All this, it's got fantastic information. It's very practical. Plus, it's got some of her own personal journey and why she started Moms Across America and why she's so committed to the cause. The other one, if you want to learn more about Professor Seralini, and you say his co-author's name so well.
Jerome Duzelet. Yeah, Chef Jerome Duzelet.
And it's written, it's pretty unique. It's a conversation between a scientist and a chef. So you can find that, I think, on Amazon.
Yeah, both of them are on Amazon.
And Zen's book is on her website too. So thanks for being our guest today, and we really appreciate all the great work you do, and just keep up the great work.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Carol. Thank you to everybody, all your listeners at Food Integrity Now. Really appreciate it.